I think for me, the future of navigation online is different and things are going to optimize, but we don't conceive them yet. Digital have never been a generation matter. Penetration of digital, there is people that are, beyond 70 years old, they are super consumer of digital, they are super happy with it because actually it makes their life much easier and they're very comfortable with it. I would encourage any of you to start building your network online, to get your mentor, to get your sponsor, because for me, it's been a major differentiator of years of information that I've accumulated.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Teens in AI podcast. My name is Claire, and I'll be your host for today's episode. This week, I have the honor to talk to another Claire Calmejean, who is a leading figure in the field of financial technology at France. She is the Chief Innovation Officer at Société Générale, a non-executive director at the online bank Boursorama, the chairman of SG Ventures, and the executive chairman of the bank-as-a-service fintech Trésor. Hi, Claire. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Claire. Hi, everyone.
And now, so before we take a deep dive into the material, could you please introduce yourself and describe a little bit of what you do at Société?
Yes, of course. So I'm I'm an IT engineer. I graduated as a computer engineer, learning development and coding, and I was a major in artificial intelligence and cognitive science. So that's a big part of me because I'm quite a geek and I love it, and I've always loved it. I'm also a mom of two little kids who are 2 and 3. And so I've lived in 4 different countries, which was a super experience for me, really humbling also because I left France about 15 years ago, spending 10 years abroad. It was super interesting to have to speak in a different language and to be the foreigner, to be the one that is different. And that have taught me a lot in terms of personal experience, but also leadership around the inclusion and diversity, something I found very important. I felt very lucky because in my career, I work today in the general management of Société Générale. So I report directly to our CEO. So Société Générale is a really, really big company. Société Générale is present in 62 countries. It's 138,000 people across the world. It's as much nationalities and countries that we are present. So it's a full melting pot. And it's a tradition of pioneering. It's born and bred in the capability to disrupt its market. And today is an interesting time because finance is at the crosswind of different challenges, regulatory challenges, but also interest rates. So it's a bit technical, but basically, today if you want to borrow money, the rate to borrow it is quite competitive for you, but that means that for banks, it's quite a hard time because we lend you money not on the best term of the last decades, but it's good also for the economy, and we are also here to support. It's our role. And there is a new usage. I guess, there is depending of your preference, you can go online, you can go physically in a branch, you can call a call center. So it's a lot of different usage that need to optimize our system. Plus, there is a lot of new entrants which are coming. And so I consider that today I do the best job in the world. I love it because, when you are here in this moment, which are unique, you can really make a difference. And I hope that we will deliver for you the best bank possible.
Wow, this is absolutely really inspiring. But now when you started studying AI, machine learning, not even mentioning fintech, was very new. How was that going into actually being a pioneer? Was your parents, were they supportive? How did they react?
Yes, I think they were. So, I think my mom, she was actually super supportive. I think it was a bit a bold choice, but to be honest, Claire, we were in the year 2000, and 2000, the year where the bubble of e-commerce startup exploded. So there was a lot actually of internet companies that were created. Internet was quite new. When I was young, there was no internet. And I'm not so old. I'm only 37 years old. But when I was young, there was no internet, there was no mobile phone, there was a lot of things that, were not existing. But as internet companies started to be created and people started to invest, saying like, okay, it's super interesting. And there was some good investment, but there was also a lot of startups that didn't have really a business model or an economic model. So they could not generate revenues. They were not so smart ideas. But because people didn't understand very well the technology, they thought like, oh, it's a good idea to invest. This market is going up and trending. And so, all this dynamism was happening around me. And I thought like, okay, computer engineering is going to be a key skills for the future, the ones that are capable to understand how computer work, hardware, software, how it's built, are going to have a unique chance to do whatever they want, whatever the work they will want to do in the next decade or 20 years after, or all their career is going to be super interesting because it's a key fundamental skill for the future that a lot of other people didn't have, because a lot of people first were way older than me when I was 18 and entering and already in the market, and they are still in the market and they never really learn even computer engineering. Today, computer engineering is taught at school. It's taught in most of the major engineering school and economic school. You can access computer engineering training. Before, it was absolutely not the case when I was at school. So my mom, she was super supportive. She was a little bit scared as well. When I started, I was the first woman in my class. And obviously I was 18 years old. I think she was a little bit like, oh, where, where are you going?
Well, it sounds like you were really ahead of the wave. Now, I guess you're like a big supporter of women in tech and banking. Who was your inspiration or role model really? Was that like your mom? Was it someone else? And is that still your role model nowadays?
Yeah, so I think, it was my mom because, and she was a source of inspiration. My mom, she returned to work. She's a doctor and she has her third kid, in her last year of studying medicine. And she decided to not practice, to be a stay-at-home mom. Like a lot of mom at the time being, a lot of mom were not working. They were stay-at-home mom, and it was very normal in my environment in France where I grew up. But I think she had that, she was very passionate about doing her work, and I saw her going back to work when she was 40, 42. When we were a little bit more grown up, me, my sister, and my brother. For me, I think it was the emancipation, the fact that I think she felt, part of her was probably not there by not working. She loved being with her kids, but she needed also to, realize herself, win her own money, be independent. And this was super important for her. And I think she didn't like so much. I never really asked her, to be honest, but I think, she was probably a little bit suffering from the previous situation, or it was imposed because with 3 kids, it's a lot of work. Actually, it was, not very relaxing. I think all the time we are very close, my sister, my brother, and I. So I guess it was quite challenging. I can say now because I have 2 little kids, 2 and 3. It's quite a sport sometimes. So I think she was my inspiration at the time being. Also, there was not so many women that were at the top of big companies. Now it's a bit different because we've seen the rise, especially in technology, of Sheryl Sandberg, of a lot of very powerful women in leading companies. There is it's not the same. We're entering a different dimension. Something is changing. So today, I felt there is much more role models. There is much more people women that want to talk about it as well. Because I think one of the challenges for decades, there have been women, but they just didn't want to talk about it. They conformed in a model which was more driven by male leadership because that was the only way to get a seat at the table. For me, all of that is changing today, and it's super, super inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think nowadays we have more role models. However, some really have the lack of seeing them or having access to talk to a few mentors. In your career, did you ever have a point where you felt discouragement I mean, even like being the only woman in your class or a woman in tech and banking, has there any time been such a feeling of where you felt, okay, I was not being supported? And if so, like, how did you cope with those emotions? Did you find a few friends, even male friends, that really supported you and motivated you to keep going and just striving for your goals?
Yeah, I think there've been such moments. There've been such moments where I felt discouraged, lonely. Even probably today. I operate a very. My role is about transformation, and in transformation, if you don't try, and if you don't fail, as such, you never succeed, because you just do whatever. You just do what is easy. And if you want to do the hard things, then you need to shoot for the star. We often say that incremental innovation is about 10 projects and 5 succeed and 5 fail. Disruptive innovation is about launching 1,000 projects and 1 succeed and 999 fail. That's what happened in the startup space, very concretely. But I think from the ground up, I quickly understood that much of your journey in life is about your support network. It's about having people around you. So yes, mentors have played a big role, sponsors, and teams, and creating an environment where at work, people are. And it's very it's very important to create transparency and trust in the way you work. And these are slightly new codes. I'm not saying it didn't exist, because you have a lot of places where full trust, full transparency exists. For example, in the army, forever, full trust, full transparency have existed, because you put your life in the hand of your comrade. So, at the end, you need to be like, it need to be,
Armored officer
between you what's going to happen at any point in time. Large organization sometimes could have to be a little bit bureaucratic sometimes. And therefore, more hierarchical in the way they were working, and therefore less transparent, clear in their objective, in their setting, or in what they were doing. Or if you're working in a startup and you're in very high growth, we know that the structure of leadership, engagement, management could be disturbed by the way it works. And for me, I'm talking about this different model. You're asking me a personal question, but I'm trying to say it's very systemic. Everywhere you work, it's about creating this environment. If it's individual around you, where you have your cycle of trust, you also include diversity, you include different point of view, because if everyone around you is the same as you, you're never going to be challenged. You're never going to understand what have worked, what have not worked, and the reason why you are failing, because it's all a journey about growth. It's all a journey about wanting to learn, wanting to develop, and wanting to stretch yourself, because you want to achieve bigger goals, because you want to change, the world, because we all want to live in a better world. We have huge challenge today, climatic challenge, technology challenge. They're not going to be solved because, we just woke up at 9 o'clock in front of our laptop. They are going to change because we're passionate about it. We work in Teens in AI. Why do we work in Teens in AI? Because we have the conviction that AI is a technology that is going to change the world. It's changing the world today. At Société Générale, it's not the future. It's today we have more than 80 use cases of AI which are developed. You will not call them AI. For you and I, it's normal things. It's like, I can talk to my chatbot. We process 15,000 conversations a day in the chatbot with 98 satisfaction rate, which means it's integrated. It supports us in the day-to-day for our work. And we do this thing in Teens in AI because we want to make sure this technology, at the young age, everyone understands it, so everyone can take the power. A little bit like in my story, where I went to do computer engineering. Today, computer engineering is so big. You need to choose specialization much more than because technology have evolved very fast, and now there is a lot of discipline and component. So yes, to your question, I believe the key success are creating this network of trust. It's also we should not fear the challenge. We should embrace it, because at the end of the day, and that's where I guess that's what is driving most of us.
I mean, you just started, in fact, on my next point. So I was just moving to the landscape more of fintech, which has grown rapidly in the past years, but especially also in the last 12 months due to the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, young people started investing using apps like Robinhood. Others started using their mobile devices to complete transactions or even talking to a chat box, not knowing they're actually using fintech and AI. Therefore, it remains a mystery to many what really fintech is. Now, in your opinion and experience, how would you categorize it and maybe even define it, since it's just such a huge subject?
It's a very typical question. What is fintech? But for me, it's just a cross of financial services and technology. I think you can categorize that some are new entrants, some are the natural evolution of new customer usage, and therefore banks have to react and to adapt. And that's also part of the fintech. So, we often joke and say you have fintech and tech fin, because, the reality is at the end of the day, now the startups are big. And, if you take a Robinhood, it starts to grow a lot. So actually, it's probably the same weight than a middle-sized bank or a small bank, that can exist, because these are global digital platforms and they operate this way. For me, what's super interesting, Claire, is we're having this conversation and already a lot about it. And I remember me when I was, when I was 18 and I started my computer engineering study, honestly, apart from going to a branch and receiving a paper, with my bank account and opening a saving account, bank didn't matter a lot for me. I didn't, the financial education was really limited. Maybe because I was a woman, I guess not. I hope not, sorry. But, what I think have changed a lot is now the access to the information to start your savings, to start to plan your life. When I graduated in IT engineering, I remember, some of my, I was super lucky to have my mom that have supported me through my studies. It was not the same for all my classmates, and some of them, they didn't know how work, how was working just a simple consumer credit. I've seen some of my friends very early on, doing a mortgage and acquiring their first flat. And then, when they were 30, some of them already had 2 flats because they had started to climb up the ladder, where, I don't know, on my side, I didn't even started to think about it. How should I build, my assets, and how should I save in order to plan for that? And I think that's a big opportunity for me. It's how do we make all these financial services more accessible for everyone? So because we are talking about something, in how do we build personal savings here? And the new technology is saying that a personal saving, you don't need to have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 euro or 100,000 euro. It's from the first euro, you have chatbots that are going to help you to save, with goal setting, to plan your holiday, to better organize it. And that's going to be with the AI, very easy to organize, where something it was requesting that, you have your table, you plan that with a banker or with someone. And, honestly, when you are young, you are not doing that, because you also, I remember going to the bank, I was like, I surely don't want to go in an office to talk with a banker that is going to look at me with my 100 euro in my account to help me to do that. I think that's a big shift. Mm-hmm. And the other one is also, I see much more younger entrepreneurs. It was super interesting. I was in the hackathon, obviously, last week with Teen AI, and I'm always impressed because, from the very young age, 12, 13, 14, 16, now people are creating their company. The lady, I was reading an article on the chief digital officer of L'Oréal from a subdivision, and at 22 years old, she had already sold their first company. I found it super. And in order to do that, you need to understand finance, because you need to understand, okay, how do I create a company? How do I start my bank account? How can I go to see investors in order to get a pitch? And all of that today, I found it super that it's accessible. And I strongly believe that's also part of the fintech landscape.
I think it's super accessible nowadays, also in the light of the COVID pandemic, just because it has all shifted online. So how has the pandemic really impacted that sector? Has it benefited it, or were there a lot of challenges where companies overwhelmed by having to implement all of these new areas into their mostly conventional types of, or basically setups?
Yeah, I mean, first, during the pandemic, unfortunately, the first thing we try to do, as we are a very large company, is to protect our colleagues and to make sure everyone is safe. And here, technology have played a key role because the bank was able to fully work completely remotely. So over 2 weeks, we moved about 50,000 colleagues working remotely. All our investment banks, so the most complex financial products, which normally required people to be there physically, also for controls to make sure everything is done properly, were able to work from home with the technology, with the right level of supervision, and etc. And today we are much more focused about, okay, how can we be even more meaningful? How can we make sure we really understand what the client wants? And AI and data play a key role into that. And that's much more where we are today and the focus than, the emergency post-COVID. I think that we are able to deal with it quite easily.
And what do you believe are the most crucial areas in a bank where AI needs to be applied? Would it be front-end operations such as a chatbot, customer marketing and relationship, or product and services like payments, transactions, investments, or potentially back office operations, risk, treasury, and audit? What do you think should it be most crucially employed and really rapidly? Or where maybe is it lacking in certain areas?
Yeah, I don't know if we can say lacking, but the question is, what is important for AI to work is to reach scale. Mm-hmm. So when you look at some of your Google or Netflix optimization, Netflix is full of AI, and we all use Netflix. And you never use the navigation of Netflix to go and say, okay, apart from me, where I would say I want to watch a British film because I'm missing in the UK, and maybe I use a navigator. But most of the time, I don't do that. The reality is Netflix know my preference, know exactly what I do, how I want to do it, and therefore will suggest for me, what is the best film or what is the top 10 selection of what I could like or what the people alongside me or in my region are watching on the day. And it works because it's very, very massively large scale. I use AliExpress quite a bit because I love their AI algorithm. It's an e-commerce platform, so it's the equivalent of Amazon, but in China. And I found it super impressive. I mean, they optimize video all the time. They optimize content on the video to display me what I want. I know exactly that what I'm looking after, they will push it back. They go in the feed. It's a mix of in the navigation of product satisfaction, reflection of how customers have used it, picture of customers, because they incentive customers to take pictures of how the packet arrived, what is the item. In banking, of course, I'm saying we use a lot of AI. We use AI in recommendation, but we yet have to completely use it for the customer purpose. We're still very focused around using AI in, I want to improve transaction. I want to improve my process. I want to improve my sales. But we have not yet cracked this part of how am I, how am I a super supportive product of building the economy, and in real time I can generate the same level of satisfaction that I can have when I am in AliExpress, but I can do that in finance. Though in finance there is some points that are super important. Is the banking industry is a trusted industry. So at the contrary of big techs, which most of the time crunch your personal data, with your consentment, because we all click on the buttons online, no? And therefore, where we put a lot of energy and effort is also to really understand that our data set are secure, are supported by some sovereignty law, are supported by being trustworthy. So at the end, we're looking for an AI which is trustworthy, an AI which is super secure, because a lot of our work is about fraud management and ensuring fraud management is okay. And we do believe that when you are doing our work, it's also about the best of both worlds. It's also about an AI which is supporting our bankers, because at the end of the day, when you go and see someone in your bank, it's personal. It's about a project where you want to set up your company. You want to, sometimes you have to deal with you've lost someone, and you need to close their account, and you need to organize the succession. It's not moments where you want to talk to a chatbot, during the crisis. We've seen analysis of McKinsey which is a big consultancy company, saying that 50% of the call could have been answered by a chatbot, but 50% of the calls were calls that needed to be answered by human, because it was, where is my money? Is it safe? Am I okay? Is the system okay? What's going to happen tomorrow in the economy or in the industry? And that is requiring human expertise.
I absolutely agree, especially if we talk about AI and machine learning, and especially digitalization. Keeping data trustworthy and private and secure is a huge talking point. Now, when you're trying to reach like new audiences and with this new technology, but also remaining trustworthy, how do you do that?
We've launched a card, basically, which is enable, people from 12 to 18 years old, they have their own application, which is fully visible by the parents on what's happening, what type of transaction, and etc. The parents can very easily top up. It's much more autonomous. I remember when I was young, my mom, she had to give me cash. Today, it's much more transparent to give money digitally, to be able to check where the spend have been done, because everybody accept card from now €1 transaction, even under. So it's especially with COVID, that's been one of the huge progress in digital payments. If you are playing a game, we can know exactly how much you spend in the game, and then parents can have a dedicated conversation. So again, in the spirit of building a healthy relationship and more trust, more autonomy, I think technology is providing progress here.
Mm-hmm. And how, if we turn the table, how do you invite the older generation who's not yet probably used to using online banking? How do you get them involved? Since they may not want to trust maybe a bank with their private information, put everything online just because it's not on paper.
I think we all had our moms calling us and saying, or our dads calling us and saying, like, is it secure to use mobile banking? Surely I had that. And I was like, yes, ma'am, it's more secure to use mobile banking actually than most of the application you are using in your phone. So it's okay. You can go ahead and you can download and install it. But I just want to say it's not a generation matter. Digital have never been a generation matter. Penetration of digital, there is people that are, beyond 70 years old, they are super consumer of digital. They are super happy with it because actually it makes their life much easier and they're very comfortable with it. At all level, you have people, and even in younger generation, you have people that are comfortable with digital and you have people that are not comfortable with digital. They don't want to use apps. They don't want to engage in internet. There is no magic bullet in it. I think, for me, the only thing I can say is looking at the challenges we have worldwide. The reality is, at one point we'll all have to embrace technology the right way. I think it's all our responsibility. I've trained my grandparents at the time being to use internet. I spend time with the youngster to make sure they're comfortable with it, because I think sometimes that's super daunting. I remember in my I work in algorithm, what it is, it's sometimes it could be quite complex. Actually, you don't have to be so good at math to be a computer engineering. Some of them are really, really good because they work in, they're really big brain, working in some of the most sophisticated artificial intelligence. But some of it is quite basic, chatbot, for example, in the Teens for AI competition, they had a chatbot about gender and asking questions about your gender if you have that. I mean, this type of technology is very accessible for everyone. So that's. I think that the trend is in place. It's been stronger with COVID, and I think it's all our responsibility anyway.
In general, there are three main types of banks: retail, commercial corporate, and investment banks. However, since employing tech into this industry, a lot of new areas have been created, such as neobanks. Before we listen to Claire's opinion on how Société Générale is using one of France's pioneer bank-as-a-service platform, Trésor, to advance fintech, I would like to demystify what a neobank is. In general terms, neobanks are financial technology firms that offer internet-only financial services and usually partner with traditional banks to federally insure customer deposits. In the light of the past years, we have seen different types and different trends, for example, like neobanks. Now, how would you classify them? Do they belong under the same umbrella of these three banks, or are they a world in itself? Are they something completely different that is going to be the future of tomorrow? And do you think, in fact, consumers will trust these banks, these types of new banks?
Maybe I should ask you, Claire. What do you think? We built a startup which I supervise in SocGen, which is called Trezor. And Trezor supply about 70 different neobanks or new service, like you are talking. So, and the reality is, all these neobanks, actually, they focus on the digital part, on the customer journey, but all the part which is regulated is actually provided by services of Société Générale. And most of the, scale-up of Trezor have tapped into expertise of the bank in order to respond to regulatory services. And I guess, it will remain the case, so this is not going to change. After, I think, probably, as it's become, as you have, startup like Trezor, which can provide for cheap, the setup for you to have a bank, and the cost of an application is not so high. Yes, there could be a lot of different neobanks which is serving different segments, and I guess it's okay because at the end of the day, I think if you look long term at internet, the reality is we will optimize the way you switch. I mean, we are still on the mindset of app. I think at one point, and we are still following, for 20 years, Google search have been, you type a word and you go in Google search. I think for me, the future of navigation online is different and things are going to optimize, but we don't conceive them yet. Like, we were not conceiving what is the iPhone. So I think a lot of things are to come, but I cannot think that, 10 years from now, the only thing we will have is an iPhone and a laptop. I think, new things will appear, new way of navigating, new way of doing that. And, that's why in Société Générale, where we focus is we believe there is something around, keeping your data safe, being able to offer this environment, this framework where your data is safe. We play a role of being these third parties that you trust. And that is going to stay with us in terms of a main differentiator, and that you may decide to go to Lydia or Helios or a different brand. But if brand multiplies, Société Générale will be able to also launch brands. So, in Trezor, which we bought, there is about 5 different projects within Société Générale, which we have launched with their own brand on the market, which belong to Société Générale. So if it's the case, we are ready to do that. Anyway, we are providing the infrastructure. And in any case, all the data of all these neobanks, they belong to Trezor. So they belong to the bank at the end. And we think there is a key role to play here.
So it sounds a lot that the neobanks are like a client-centric approach, because in your recent Innovation Observatory edition, it discusses how GAFA, so the methodology for Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, have reshaped their business model from a traditional product approach to a strict client-centric one, allowing them to become a gatekeeper ruling over data and access to digital audiences. Now, how do you think, I mean, like you already said it, you already control that, but how do you think other banks can learn from these monopolies to shape their client interaction, since they're very strong? For example, even like Netflix, you just mentioned, they have such a personalization on it that they really know their client. Do you think there's a future that banks may also use those interactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely. I think banks are improving. They've responded to this competition. They've responded to these new entrants. Well, at my time, doing computer engineering was really differentiating. I think, today, in digital, the jobs have evolved, and you can be, in computer engineering, you can be a data scientist, you can work in AI, you can work in design, in all the work around design, anthropology, customer centricity. And these are skills which are still very rare, will keep growing on the market to come. And the reality of your question is not everyone is going to be able to understand sufficiently quickly that you need this key skill set. And I think that's going to pay a difference at the end, that are more long-term, that are not short-term economics in terms of looking, at how much a bank, the share price of a bank, of how it works. But I think in the long run, the companies that have understood that very early, they're going to be more resilient, more sustainable, and still there, where some other banks, they will have missed the point and they will not be able to recruit these people, and they will have to rely on services of maybe big neobanks that have focused in this customer journey, and either buy them, either do strategic partnership with them, and do strategic partnership maybe with Google or Amazon, because they have this type of skill set in-house. So I think, we have a window of 10 years where, we'll see who's engaging in this journey or not. What is sure is, part of the creation of my role at Société Générale, which report again directly to the CEO, was understanding, okay, it's where it's going. I am not the only one. Not every bank have a chief innovation officer in their executive committee, but in Europe there is about 3-4 of us, in about 50 to 60 banks. So that give you an indication of the importance.
So how do you keep up with the current AI market trends and build with confidence into the future?
Yes, so I've always been a very curious person. I've always loved to learn, loved to read. My team, they joke about me because they call me Claire as a platform. They say the big strength of Claire is she is capable to ingest an amount of information which is unbelievable, to compute it and to connect people between each other, or to make connections that very few people are capable to manage. My husband, he calls that thinking in stars. It's like going in all directions. For a traditional mind, it's sometimes a bit complicated to think in stars, because they like to think in square, which make a difference between, the innovation director and maybe some of the more traditional leadership C-suite. But I think I've always been curious. Most of the time, honestly, what I've done is quite early on, I was on Twitter, on social media, and I was able to create my network, so people virtually, which I end up to make physically in safe ways. Please don't go out in the net and meeting people without knowing exactly it's the people they are saying they are. But, I've met this network, I've built my network, and then I had people where I could, bounce back my ideas, chat overnight, and etc. And this network have grown with me. And as I was growing, I became an influencer. So I became one person that people wanted to follow, because I was also sharing back my content. So I was at the same time consuming, but also sharing back. And this have led me to be in quite systemic manner in digitally, in this constant, way to get the information, to compute the information. And I would encourage any of you to start building your network online, to get your mentor, to get your sponsor, because for me, it's been a major differentiator of years of information that I've accumulated. I also, I was quite lucky. I mentioned I lived in 4 different countries, which means that I never close my mind. So basically, I still read a lot of, I'm subscribing to the information in the US, which is one of the main journal of the main coast, which is providing top information in top exec of something that is not so much in my geography, but have impact in my day-to-day work. And therefore, I have insights that maybe some other people don't have. I still read a lot of the UK press, and therefore, I was able to follow the Brexit, and I still read a lot of the European and Asian press in the day-to-day basis. I also feel very lucky, Claire, because, I'm with my position, I cover worldwide, and I can work with all the teams. And when you were mentioning about the observatory, obviously I can work with the China team. In a day, I can go in China, in Asia, in India, going back to France, going in Germany, and I always, I'm feeling very lucky because the team is very insightful, and with their support and with their help, I get now a lot of my information. I have to say that in my mind, I'm still like super young, but I'm also getting a little bit disconnected with sometimes technologies. And I mentioned I'm a little bit a geek, so I force myself really to test all the time technology. I was talking about Lunch Club, Clubhouse, Twitter Space, TikTok. I never let one sleep. I always want to try. I always want to understand.
Now, my final question is for you. Now, if you weren't working in the space of fintech or banking, which area do you think you would be working in? And what would be like your second dream job?
As I mentioned, it's my dream job. So I think it's a long time I've done education. I mean, like I've always been very close from students because I always felt I was lucky in my career, and that it was my responsibility to give back. And I think challenges around education and making education available for everyone is something that interests me. I mean, I'm lucky enough to also be in the advisory board of a net tech company. So I actually can do my secondary job, Claire, at the same time.
You have it all. You have it all.
So, I don't have this problem, but maybe one domain that I found super interesting is everything around medtech. When you ask me, I became a computer engineer. Actually, my parents are both doctors, and I wanted to be a doctor, but it's a very long time to study. I have to say I'm very lucky today because with my job, I can also advise. I today advise some of doctors. I hope for you in the podcast, there was some good tips here, some inspiration. What I can tell you is, these are jobs of the future. And I wish you can, deeper too. For sure, I say today it's not about being a digital leader anymore. You're all digital leader. You just don't know it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Teens in AI podcast. Thank you very much, Claire, for joining me to discuss the impact digitalization has had on the banking sector. Please let us know how you feel about the advancement of fintech, if you yourself use online banking, and if you could ever imagine a world in which cash no longer exists. We are looking forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions on Twitter or Instagram at Teens in AI Pod. We hope you join us next Thursday for another episode. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great week.